monkey and do all that stuff.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ashley, and I am the host of Talking About It. We are a small little podcast that talks about mental health, and we're trying to break the stigma of talking about mental health. And it is based upon following me, who is a person going through anxiety and panic attacks. So if I look awkward right now, I apologize. I'm like freaking out. I spent the last few years in fight and flight mode. So this is kind of really the first thing that I have come out to do. So thank you guys, Jez, Grizz, Richie, everybody who's here, because the only way we can talk about it is to show up and let people know that regardless of if you're scared, if you're freaking out, as long as you show up for yourself, then we're good to go. So we will be talking to Dr. David Jones, and I'm so grateful, thank you, for coming on, and he has dedicated his life to helping people heal, cope, and thrive. He is a licensed psychologist who has done incredible work with veterans and the El Paso community. So Dr. Jones, thank you so much for being here, and I know you have a few things that you like to say.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, especially to speak to musicians. You know, I have a mentor who has this line I love to say. It says, "La cultura cura." And what is more of a driver to culture than music? You know, music has the power to heal, to inspire, to teach, to educate. You know, I remember being a little kid, 13 years old, listening to a group called Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy. Anybody ever heard of them? They're dope. But anyways, it was the first thing that really introduced me to racism and the power of speaking out and speaking up and what it means when we begin to stand in our truth. And I'm so grateful every day, because without music in my life, I don't get to be where I am today. And so it's so important that we talk about mental health and that we think about what our own mental health looks like, right? Because for you to continue to do what you do, you have to be well. Now, not perfect, not, right all the time. In fact, I remember I was at a concert and Annie DeFranco was speaking, and she said, if I learned one thing in all of my life, if you're not getting happier as you're getting older, you're effing up. So it doesn't need to be perfect. Mental health is not about perfection, it's about improvement. Because see, oftentimes we pick up these ways of coping as children or as young people throughout our lives, and we begin to practice those ways. We begin to practice these coping strategies, and sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they come through spaces and ways that in that child's mind, we do the best that we can. And so we need help sometimes to learn new ways, to practice new ways. And I'm sure you musicians know that the first time you picked up a guitar or a drum or whatever, you probably weren't that great. Maybe you were better than me, but you weren't as good as you are now. And it's the same thing. Mental health is about a practice. It's about a practice of learning how to deal with the world and internalize information. And healing is possible. I love the work that I do. I work a lot at UTEP now. I work with students. I've used to run sexual assault prevention programs. I'm blessed to be on the community board for Planned Parenthood. And in all of these spaces, I see healing. All of these spaces, I see people doing that healing work. And like I said, it's about stepping up to that space, allowing this inspiration to flow. Because when you're in the zone, you're channeling something so much more powerful than yourself. You know, I feel this when I'm doing therapy, and sometimes there's things come through me, I don't even know where it comes from. And I'm sure you musicians can recognize that. You know, being in that space and just coming up with a lick or a lyric or something, it's like, man, I don't know where that came from. And it's like when we allow ourselves to sit in awe of this energy, of this spirit, to feel gratitude. And that's why I loved all the thank yous going around today. right? Because being grateful, even for the small things, even sometimes for the shitty things, helps us to power forward. I use this thing, I call it shadow gratitude, right? Being grateful for the things in your life that sometimes didn't go well. See, for me, I used to be, I mean, I still am pretty, don't get me wrong, but I used to be a lot better looking. I gained over 150 pounds through my doctoral program because I use food as a way to cope. I come from a Sicilian family. What am I going to do, you know? And I think about that sometimes and how necessary that was. Because when I was younger, thinner, and prettier, things came to me differently. But as I grew up and grew out, I had to change the way I approach folks. I had to change the way I approach women even. And you know what that got me? That got me married to the most beautiful woman in the world, who I probably would not have been able to see and to be with if it wasn't for this thing that a lot of people would look at like a tragedy. You know, and I say that and I share a little by my own vulnerability because sometimes these things that feel like tragedy in our lives can actually help to teach us. Now, I'm never going to be able to say, oh, yay for your trauma. No, like it would be great if we could learn some of these lessons without that trauma. So I'm never going to cheerlead for trauma. But the resiliency and the power that can come from that healing, that then allows us to reach out to people in our community, you know, because we can all teach each other. We can all see each other. And the power of just being seen by somebody is healing. And so again, I mean, I could go on for hours. I know we're here to hear music, so I don't want to take up too much time, but you know, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the work that you do, both in your personal life, struggling through anxiety, struggling through that, so you can bring your gift to the people. You know, thank you for that, but also for this podcast and everything else.
Yeah, so a lot of the healing portion was about finding your purpose. And I think that you touched on it a little bit speaking to musicians, and it doesn't matter who you are, what your lifestyle, anything like that. As soon as you can find your purpose, then it kind of allows you to move forward and kind of get things balanced and put together, you know. For me as a stay-at-home mom, my purpose was my children, was being a good wife, was doing all of that. So when I started to have to, my kids got older, all this starts happening, then it's like, oh, I have to start focusing on myself. So really, I was one of those who was thinking that therapy won't help me, this isn't going to help me. Like, I've had anxiety and panic since I was 6 years old. So back then there was no diagnosis for it. It was just, I was a bad kid. Now there are so many resources that I was able to kind of find a team and everything like that. And that's what I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jones. And forgive me, because every time I say Dr. Jones, I think Indiana Jones, and it just kind of throws me off. So in my head, I'm saying it like Data.
That's okay.
But yeah, so I wanted to ask you, because you have worked with veterans and then with UTEP students and throughout the community, what are some of the most common mental challenges that you find amongst the groups?
You know, I mean, it's hard to say because each person's struggle is so unique, right? There's anxiety, depression, trauma, you know, all of these things. But I think, you know, I often call myself a liberation psychologist because I think when I think about mental health, I think about the importance of liberation. So we have to liberate ourselves from these constructs, from sexism, from racism, from classism. All of this affects our mental health. And it's important to have the concept of and an understanding. And I think if I were to kind of boil all of that down to one of the most common things, it's this, I mean, it's a lack of self-love. You know, it's a lack of seeing yourself as valuable, as an essential human being. You know, and I'm so glad you brought up purpose. When I finally open up my private practice, which will be soon, it's going to be called Connection, Purpose, and Meaning.
Nice.
Because I found that that's the core of human happiness, with connection being one of the most important pieces. So we see lack of connection, especially in this day of social media, where we all see each other, but we're not connected anymore. You know, finding your purpose, understanding what you were here to do. You know, music is part of that purpose, but it's a piece of it. So allow your whole self to come through. And then finally, meaning. How do we make meaning of our life, of our struggles? And when we learn how to do that, seek connection, sit in our purpose, and find the meaning of what we were put here to do and the struggles that we go through. That's kind of why I brought up that shadow gratitude piece. Because I think when we have that, it gives us the energy and the focus to push through some of these challenges and continue to show up for the practice of mental well-being.
So we are streaming live and we are getting questions coming in. So we had a question that says, what would you say to someone who has lost passion for their purpose? And how would you tell someone to find a new purpose?
Well, I think it's baby steps, but it's starting out with finding what inspires you. I mean, listening to music, getting connected. And sometimes that baby step starts with taking a shower in the morning. It starts with getting up and going for a walk. See, we all think that we have to find this grand magical answer. And I always joke around, it's like, I got no place to carry a wand anymore. My wand broke a long time ago and I can't ta-da anything better. Right? But when we learn how to take baby steps towards what inspires us, towards what motivates us and what moves us. And I think we have to find like people to connect to. Yeah, I was so blessed to be asked to be a part of the Planned Parenthood Community Board because, like, wow, that's a great way to live out this purpose of making a difference in the world. And there's so many small or large organizations in our city that need help. We're living in a time where our community has been under attack. And if we can learn how to connect through that, if we can learn how to support each other through that, both with our time, with our energy, with our funding, that can help lead us to a greater purpose. And then connection creates connection. And that helps foster even more purpose, I think. And so be gentle with yourself if you've lost purpose. There's days where I feel like I've lost it. You know, there's a lot of crap going on right now.
Yeah.
And it's difficult sometimes to weed through all of that. But we have to be gentle with ourselves as we find that and start small.
And I'm trying to be gentle with myself right now because you get so frustrated because you're putting this work into healing. And we've gotten to a place where it's like, I'm breaking all of these walls and I'm breaking all of these things. And then my body is still reacting,
Yes.
right? So even though I'm in my brain, I'm safe. This tightness in my chest is normal. Like, it's just, you're safe. And so it's just it's yes, starting with these baby steps, but it's continuously practicing and practicing and telling yourself. And y'all, it is exhausting and it's draining, but it's also the most beautiful thing because I'm here and we're here talking about mental health and we are supporting each other and we're finding a community. And I feel so many times when we are dealing with mental health issues, and you had mentioned a little bit about finding a purpose, or when you're going through things, you're not feeling a certain way. I think a lot of it is confidence. You lose confidence in yourself. You lose belief in yourself. You're wanting external validation from so many things. And until you can realize that you are the one that has to give that comfort, that's when you start to see the progress. And the fact that, like you said, social media, I have a love-hate thing with it. Because of social media, I'm able to kind of get these words out. But at the same time, I always say on my show, switch up your algorithm. Look up something today that you wouldn't typically look up, because you get so caught up into the algorithm that it just kind of continues you in this deep, dark hole, right? So Dr. Jones, can you share a few practical tools, whether it's breathing exercises, journaling prompts, or grounding techniques that anyone who is listening, who is here can try, that I can try while I'm sitting here with you because my ice is about to be melted?
Yeah. So there's a couple things in terms of grounding and getting yourself centered. The first one I talk about is box breathing. And so it's breathing in for 5 seconds, holding it for 5 seconds, out for 5 seconds, holding it for 5 seconds, in for 5 seconds. See, because one of the things that starts to happen when we get anxious is our parasympathetic nervous system, right? Our heart rate and everything starts to get us ready to fight or flight. You know, are we going to fight that saber-tooth tiger, or are we going to run from the saber-tooth tiger? It's a psychoneuroevolutionary response to deal with life and death. But speaking in front of you, although maybe very nerve-wracking, is not life and death, right? So we have to understand that, like, okay, so now I have to breathe, because what's happening in my body is that I'm breathing, I'm getting more anxious, right? And so the next thing I talk about is called progressive muscle relaxation. And it starts with kind of flexing, you know, from your toes to your calves to your thighs, you know, all the way up. And then holding it for 4 seconds and releasing it for 5. Because we don't realize how much stress and anxiety we're holding until we like consciously release it. Now, the other thing I often talk about, I say healing is like a spiral, right? When we're first in the crap, we're spiraling around it a lot, and we always come around to it. But then as we get better, the healing, it kind of happens, but then we circle back around to some of our stuff sometimes. You know, I always tell people, like, I went on this spiritual journey to get more connected, to deal with my ego. You know, and then I did, you know, I finished my 4 years, and that helped me be grounded. And you know what? Then my ego was the best. I had the best ego. I was the most humble of anybody that, oh shit, there it is again. Right? So part of this healing thing, we have to just understand that it's going to come back around. But when it comes back around up here at the top, it's not the same space as it is when we're down here, but it kind of feels similar. Yeah. So we have to remember that we've done all of this work. We found things that have helped us, and it's going to come back around again. So if I need to check myself, well, okay. Yeah, I still did all the work, but I'm a human becoming. You know, one of my artist friends has this song, and it says, I'm just a human becoming. You know, just watch me become. I'm just a human becoming, and the best is yet to come. Now imagine some sweet blues licks in there, right? And a better voice. But it's like, you're just a human becoming. And if we can accept ourselves as a person in process, as a person who's healing, it's so much easier than to show up for these times where, like, oh crap, there it is again. You know, I work with a lot of survivors of sexual assault, and we talk about recognizing these triggers and these traumas and grounding ourselves in that moment and knowing that we're safe, but giving some grace. You know, I've worked a lot with ex-convicts too, some people that came up in the streets of Detroit, you know, during the crack epidemic. And it's like, yeah, you had to do what you had to do to survive at that moment. We're not saying it was good, bad, or the other, but if you don't give yourself some spaces to reconnect with yourself, to reconnect with your community, with your humanity, we're just going to keep spiraling. We're going to keep spiraling. So I think that gentleness is a huge key, you know, that self-love I always come back to. Yeah,
I agree. I think that's the hardest part, right? Is giving yourself that thing, because I'll go through the same thing. I'll be like, all right, well, I'm here, I'm on stage, I'm doing this. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, but you're like, in my brain, I feel like I'm falling apart. Mm-hmm. And until you said right there, you're not dying. Like, even my heart rate went down. I'm like, okay, like, so it's just giving yourself that grace and giving yourself the permission to feel the feelings and deal with them. But also, Dr. Jones, Richie and Grizz had mentioned some of these things happening where there's been cuts to, like, the crisis line and things like that, help for others. Are there any programs or community efforts that people can take advantage of now? Is there anything that, if they feel like they're losing a resource? I know specifically it was for the LGBTQ through the crisis line. Now they had an option for it, and now that's getting rid. I would like to clarify, though, and maybe you can kind of elaborate and speak more on it, is that you can still call and text 988 for the assistance. But locally, is there anything? And also, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, you know, I know there's a couple organizations in our community that provide low cost or free resources. Project Vita is one of them. You know, they have therapists that can help folks. You know, Planned Parenthood doesn't provide therapy, but it provides a lot of other services. And I think sometimes it's like, it requires this trial and error. So, you know, there's a lot of therapists out there, you know, that take insurance or other things like that. But one of the things I think is so important about looking for a therapist is you have to find somebody that hears you. You know, somebody that you feel like can see you. And if you're with somebody and they can't do that, it's okay to find somebody else. Because I think a lot of times people can maybe go to therapy or try one way of healing, and it's like, well, this isn't for me. Well, okay, bet. Like, what's next then? Find what works for you. You know, I tell my clients, if I got a beard hair over here that like makes you not be able to concentrate on what I'm saying, let me know. I'm not going to shave my beard, but I know a lot of therapists without beards. You know, so like we can, and it's about finding that fit. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's group therapy, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's spirituality. You know, there was a point in my life where it was my cat. You know, like I had a beautiful cat, and I would sit and just pet this cat for like hours trying to deal with myself. So it takes this, what I call constant experimentation, this willingness to try multiple things. You know, and with these resources getting cut, that's one of the things that we really have to kind of look to. And unfortunately, sometimes when we're in that space is the hardest time to actually be creative and find something that works. But we can call some of these resources in our community. We can call some of our nonprofit organizations that can help guide us and help us find us, put us in the right space. You know, and then one of the things that I think has been the most important thing in my mental health is I started a men's group a while back. You know, not as a therapy group, just as some brothers who can get together and talk about life. You know, so begin to find your community and intentionally create spaces. Maybe it's 2 or 3 people, but these 2 or 3 people, you know, sharing, communicating, reaching out is so essential, so important.
I agree. I thank you for that. I think, are we close to time? Because I ended up pressing pause on my timer, so it paused a few minutes ago. How are we on time? Okay. So again, we will be having a list of resources on our platform. We'll connect with Dr. Jones so that I can get some more locally that you guys can find on our resources. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing not just your expertise, but your compassion, your clarity. And I hope that everyone listening takes away something helpful in finding their next step or their baby step. So thank you. We will be back with our second segment here in a little while. So thank you, guys.
Thank you all very much.